All right, we are live for episode 82 of the
Let's Go podcast. And this is a very special episode. It is our inaugural JCBL episode, and we are super excited. And hopefully, this could be the beginning of something that's very special. And again, to help continue to grow the JCBL and grow it, even more than what it is and what it's been the last many years. Of course, we're new and we're here just to help and to make things better as best we can. And no better guest than Mr. Etan Walls here with us. Etan's been a tremendous help for both David and I in helping to sort of, jump into this JCBL culture and try to grow it as much as we can. And we're very excited.
Hi, thanks,
How are
guys.
you?
Good. So it's been an interesting beginning for you guys, huh?
Yeah.
definitely, there's a pre-existing culture, there's a transition period, which has been challenging, but with your help and others' help, we're, I think, understanding things a little bit better than we did at the beginning. There are also certain logistical challenges that are very hard, like umpiring, which is something we'll get to. There are different logistical challenges that are challenging, but there's also a very embedded culture, which is sort of new for me and Avi. I mean, it's a deep culture. This thing's been around for
Yeah.
I was in it about 30 years ago, a little bit less. So when you get into groups and you get into culture, it's like there are a lot of things you have to learn very quickly. Otherwise, they hit you in the head.
So yeah, well, thank you for the introduction, Avi and David,
Sure.
and thank you for coming in to what originally was the Jewish Community Little League many years ago, and is now the Jewish Community Baseball League. A little bit about me and my interactions with the league. I live in Great Neck. Um, when we got married, we moved to Great Neck instead of moving to Queens, and my wife was
Controversial.
yeah, very, yeah, very. I was a smarter one. I didn't pay city taxes. My wife was in law school, and we didn't have kids yet, and she told me to go get a hobby. And so I used my love of baseball, my absolute love of baseball, as a long suffering Mariners fan, to go out and go coach. I started with a team that was in seventh grade at the time. I coached them for 2 years. Then I took a team from third grade all the way to eighth grade. Um, by that time, I had some kids. I took a couple years where I was an umpire, base umpire, and mostly working with Paul, who's everybody knows. Um, and then I started again when my oldest son started little league in third grade. I coached him from third grade um, through eighth grade with another longstanding coach, and a couple years later started with my son Lewis, who's now in sixth grade, and I had an overlap of two teams for a couple years, but I'm coming to the end of this journey. JCLL or JCBL?
Wait, hold on. How did you coach two teams at one time?
So I luckily 1 year was COVID, so there was not an issue there. Um, 1 year, I think I missed one game just because my older son's games need to be scheduled around bar mitzvahs and graduation. So most of the games were on weeknights rather than Sundays. So it was kind of like alternating, and I kind of worked it out. If I needed to prioritize one kid over the other, I was going to the younger kid, and the other coach would do it. And the second
How did you decide which kid to prioritize? Okay, I don't want to get too
I was I
political.
was the head, I was the head coach for my younger son, and for my older son, I was kind of like a bench coach. We had a guy named Glenn Zuckerman who was also
Glenn Zuckerman, HSL softball legend. We
yeah.
love Glenn. He's been on this podcast a few
Has he
times.
ever has he ever won a championship in HSL? Because he'll tell you about the JCBL championships that he won. I won more, but he'll say that he won the most, and I didn't win anything.
That's very like him. Next time you see him, you should also mention that you heard he has trouble. He's a great hitter, but he has trouble hitting off of Avi Edelman when Avi's
Oh,
pitching.
I definitely will tell Glenn. I was on last week.
Make sure to let him know.
Yeah. So Glenn was the head coach, and I was kind of like the bench coach because if you know Glenn, you're never the head coach with Glenn. We actually, funny story.
No, I don't. I actually don't know him in that context. What's he like?
Oh yeah, it's Glenn. Yeah, Glenn was. Yeah.
Just very intense. Very intense. Very intense.
Yeah, Mark Goldman also coached with us. If you know Mark, he's also pretty intense.
I don't know.
Yeah. But the league is the original Sunday weeknight non-Shabbat Little League, right? It was the first opportunity Jewish kids had to be able to be in a Little League that wasn't playing on Shabbat. And from what I understand, it started in the 80s and early 80s and it has kept going all this time. And there's a rich history there. I know in Great Neck, so in Queens, it's based upon a shul. In Great Neck, it's not. So there's some fun history there. Great Neck, there was fights over which kids were members of which shuls because 50 years ago, Young Israel Great Neck started, and so then people would poach kids from one shul to the other. And there were fights. Is this kid a member of this shul? Is this kid a member of that shul? um, about 15 years ago, there was a splinter group. The Mashadi Jewish Center had a group. They haven't come back because they had a fight over kids over an A team versus a B team. So, Jews always will get into a fight and then go start a different shul. Yeah, as the saying goes. But look, I look at other leagues. There's a Great Neck Little League. There's other leagues that are PAL leagues. Surprisingly, over the years, JCBL has been one of the more competitive leagues, even with the lack of sometimes organization or issues with umpires. I've always had competitive teams that we played against. It was most competitive, probably my second team. That and intense at that time in the early 2000s.
So when did you start coaching? Because you mentioned it was before your kids were born, but I didn't really get a year.
2003.
In three. So, and your oldest is how old now?
15.
15. Got it. So that was so you were so you were coaching for a while before he was born, before he started playing.
Yeah, maybe 2004. Yeah.
2004. And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Seattle.
That's why you're a long-suffering Mariners fan. I couldn't figure that out.
Yeah, I grew up in Seattle, and I never had the opportunity to play Little League or football or anything like that because there's no Jewish leagues and everything was on Shabbos or on Friday night.
Oh, so you were not just a long-suffering Mariners fan, you were a long-suffering Shomer Shabbos Jew who didn't get to play. So I guess that begs the question, after 20 years of coaching, do you feel like you scratched that itch?
I probably scratched that itch 5 years ago. But,
so, and
I was gonna say, he scratches so much, it's probably bleeding now. No.
In all honesty, I really enjoy coaching kids. I actually want to. I've been kind of in the back of my mind wanting to go coach a school, either in baseball or football, like flag football, which I don't want to talk about here, but that's another thing that I have passion for.
You mentioned you had told me that you were connected with that whole Jew Ball crew. Shout out to Jordan Hiller and Shalom Prager and our guys.
Love those guys, but we're talking about JCBL here. Look, I love teaching kids. I think that when you get kids who are a little bit younger, the opportunity to teach them is much higher, and so I have had a lot of success getting people over the hump. We've had kids who couldn't throw a ball when they came in third grade and really developed into some of the best players. And some of the best players I had are still in my mind, some of the most amazing players, pitchers, hits I've ever seen in my life.
Did you have any experience teaching or anything like that before you started coaching?
No.
Got it. I just messaged with Glenn that I'm on with you, and he said, if you ever need a response for something in the middle of the day about softball or baseball, you just mentioned Glenn. He's like, "Oh yeah, of course I know Etan. He was my assistant from 2017 to 2023."
There you go.
There you
And
go.
he said if Etan is honest with you, he will tell you who the best Little League coach of all time is. But I'm not sure if he'll be honest.
Yeah. Glenn will say he is the best Little League coach of all time. He's a very good coach. He had very talented teams. But I'm better.
But you're better. So what? Before we get into more general JCBL hock, which I'm interested in, I'm curious if you like. Are there any philosophies about coaching or a way you do things? I don't. It's not such a concrete question. It's obviously something you love a lot. You've been doing it for 20 years at obviously a hefty salary. It obviously is very gratifying. So what? I don't know. I'm just curious for you to talk more about it. Is there a way you do it?
Yeah. When I was younger, I was Captain Blood. The players that I had at the beginning and even my first and second team, I was tough on them. I was all in, very tough, very hard on them. There was push-ups for errors. There was running, a lot of running.
This is in the JCBL.
What? Yeah.
Wow, I'm surprised
Yeah.
parents went for that.
It was at a time, right? Kind of a sandwich, where it was still a little bit okay. But in those teams, the parents just dropped their kids off and saw the product at the end of the day. And those kids who were on my team grew up to be really good adults, and that was what I was trying to teach. I wanted them to learn responsibility. I wanted them to understand the things that they need to do when they're older. It wasn't necessarily about baseball. It was teaching lessons about being a man, um, um, and uh, um, and I wanted to impart on that to them. My second team, I look at those kids as my son in many cases, and I still have relationships with them as they've grown up, gone to college, are in the working world now, um, and are starting to have their own kids. And they share their successes with me. They share the things that are tough in their lives with me, and that's gratifying to see that they've grown up that way. And if I can do that for my son, uh, I will be extremely gratified at the end of the day. But my son is, still my son. So it's a little bit different when I'm teaching other people's kids.
Right.
I'm
I
a
will
lot,
say.
I'm a lot tougher on my sons than I'm on other people's sons.
I will say, by the way, on that note, I know that when just now when we hear Etan say about running laps and push-ups, like it could be initially like, oh, how could he do that? But like I saw my brother. My brother is from Brooklyn. He's my stepmother's Syrian, so my brother's growing up in the SY world. So he's full Mag and David, and plays in the center, and he has a whole team. And he's very official. He's in Little League in Brooklyn. And he has a basketball league in the center and a travel league and this and that. And he has coaches all the time that come over to our house, to my stepmother's house, actually, will coach him. And I was watching one of his lessons the other week, and this guy's a brilliant, such a nice guy, not a Jewish guy, but so I saw my brother Harry. He missed a layup, and then his coach is like, "Harry, I need 20 laps back and forth right now," and he didn't want to do it. He's upset. He did the laps, but like, they have such a good relationship, and their bond is so tight. So like, it really depends. Like a lot of times that really works for kids. They really have to know the kid, but like, it's not an all or nothing thing. Like I see in my brother, he's young, he's a kid, but like he really benefits off this, and he's a very good player. And it's a lot more common than people think, and I think it really depends on how it's done. It could be very, very productive.
Yeah, I was a yeller, and I'm not as much of a yeller as I used to be. Don't get me wrong, I still am a yeller when it comes to my own kids, but I've really toned down my approach as I've taken like a Joe Torre approach to coaching, and I've tried to get the kids because they're different. The kids are different. The teams that I had 15, 20 years ago were much more resilient and could take harsher feedback a lot better than the kids now. And I see it in my kids. They can't do it. So I need to take a empathetic, calmer approach with them. And for this generation of kids, it works much better.
Understood. Glenn just sent me like a dozen questions to ask you. I don't think I could get into all of them, but he said, ask him if there are any Little League rivalries.
Oh God, yes. So let me tell you a little story. So going back to that second team, there's a parent. There was a coach. I'm not going to say his name. Um, we were very much rivals with Jamaica States. Young Israel of Jamaica States had teams around the same age as the ones that I coached when my second team, and we were very much rivals there. So much so that I was at a pace-off program 4 years ago. First time ever I went to a pace-off program. That coach was there. That coach came up to me, gave me a big hug. His wife did not talk to me. She was still angry at me about the baseball like 15 years before. Um, and she still like was really tough with me. So yeah, Young Israel of Jamaica States is very much a rival. For my older son's team, KGS was a huge rival. They would show up, and they would look like they were just out of Shabbos or something, and they would have one pitcher who would just dominate. In the older years, and it drove us crazy.
Do you remember the name of the pitcher?
No, I can't remember the name. I probably get it for you um, if I look back in my files. Um, uh, and then there's always the in-town rival. If you were a younger team and there was an older team in town, so let's say for Great Neck, you're the third grade team, and then there's a fourth grade team. When you played that older team, it was always rough. It was even worse if there was two third grade teams or two fourth grade teams from Great Neck, because you played against each other, and you're going to see those kids in school and in shul, and you're matching up against them, and it's intense. You don't want to lose to them. It's your brother or your cousin or whoever. You don't want to lose to them, and so those games were always super intense. And then when you had the Machadis in the league, that was very intense. I remember, I think what Glenn was referring to, one game where it was the semifinal game against the Machadis. We were in Great Neck in a really nice field. They must have brought down 40 people, 50 people to a Little League game. And I had called, talked to the umpire about something at a high level, and got something turned around, got a call turned around, and I had 40 or 50 people screaming at me how much they hated me, and it was brutal, but
Wait, the call to the umpire was during the game,
during the
or
game, during the game.
so paint the scene for me. There's a call in the game, and you call a different umpire.
No, no, no. I appealed the
He
call that
appealed
he
the call. He appealed the call, and the umpire overturned it and
right,
respected the appeal. And then 50 parents came running at him and screaming, like, "What are you
right.
doing? The umpire made a call. How can he go out there?" I can actually picture that. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah.
I'll fast forward in that game. Um, in that game, this is where we had some issues with umpires. The first base umpire was a Mashati kid, and he was blatantly making calls for the Mashati team. And at one point, uh, this was at a field that had a wall, and Gavi Lichter hit the ball over the wall for a home run. And this umpire um, told the first baseman to appeal to second base after he touched home. And the main umpire, called him out because he said he missed second base. Now, you can imagine how they erupted in this, and Glenn and I lost our minds. I mean, how do you call a kid out for missing second base in Little League when they hit the ball 25 feet? Like,
Glenn also. I'll stop mentioning Glenn. Like
that's
I
fine.
said, if you ever need softball or baseball hock in the middle of the workday, just message Glenn about a game that happened 17 years ago. Um, he he said he's writing about the time you got into it with the coach from Plainview. the ump called out your batter for stepping on the plate when he hit, and you went bananas.
I did. I did. Yeah. I mean, I've gone bananas on a lot of different issues. Um, Mostly when it's just boneheaded umpire calls. But there are a few umpires where they make boneheaded calls, and I just am not going to do it with them because they've thrown me out of games. Paul's thrown me out of 2 games my whole life.
What happens? You know what's funny? I was in JCBL. I might have been called JCLL back then in the
Yeah.
late '90s, and I have a memory of my coach was thrown out of the game.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking back to that now because we're running all these softball leagues. I'm like, that was a wild scene where the guy got thrown out. So we had to he had to go like across the street. Might have been in Great Neck actually. We might have been playing in Great Neck. There was a sort of road.
Polo Road.
Yeah, is that what it's called? So we have to. It's still even across the road. You're still pretty close, but the ump basically said he has to stand across the road, and that was considered being thrown out of the game. How do they handle it now when you're thrown out?
Well, the first one, there were other parents there. It was like my second to last year with my second team, and it was a rivalry game, and I just had lost it, and I called Paul a word that you're not supposed to say ever, and definitely not to an umpire. And may start with the mother. I'm just going to stop there. Family programming, and you don't say those things to umpires, and you really don't try to show up an umpire about a call that is a ball or a strike. And I felt like this call was wrong, and I got tossed from that game, and I had to leave. I was off the field. I was gone. The second time, there was no one else there to coach, so he made me sit on the bench, and I wasn't allowed to stand the rest of the game. And he told me that he didn't care if there wasn't another adult there, that if I said one more word, I would be in my car for the remainder of the game. And so I sat there and I didn't say a word, and we got through it, and we hugged it out at the end, and
Let's see if you could figure this out. So Glenn sent me a list of the 3 worst calls that umps have made. We already covered the first 2. You mentioned on your own the missing second base. He mentioned the home plate, and then you remember that. Can you get the third one? Let's see if you can remember.
I don't. I mean, there's so many plays. I don't know what he say the third one was.
The catcher, something about the catcher using a regular glove and not a catcher's glove.
Oh God! So when you hit 5th grade, you have to have the catcher has to have a catcher's glove, and you get into the first year of 5th grade and you don't know this, or you try to get around it because it's hard for those kids to open up a catcher's glove. Like, to do this as a 5th and 6th grader when all of them have OT issues is not easy. And so, they made us use a catcher's glove one. I was just, Glenn's right. That's memorable.
That's memorable. All right, we only have about 15 minutes before I got to run. So let's get to JCBL General Hock. So, we're doing this podcast. We're going to send it out to the JCBL community. And I don't know the culture well enough. I played in it from, I would guess, about 95 to 2000, something like that. But, that was a very long time ago. I wasn't sure if there are any hot button issues that I should avoid. So going into this blind. So I'm just sort of curious. What are are there any contentious things? Are there any things that need changing? Are there things that are political? Anything that you could give us insight into?
So the political stuff is really behind us, because when they went from Little League to Baseball League, they left the National Little League rules, which allowed for girls to play. And so then they were opening up to a larger group of kids to allow them to just be boys and something like that. So
I don't know what that means. I'm sorry. What does it mean, just be? I didn't follow that.
Just have boys. They weren't having girls in the league when they moved to JCBL off of JCLL, because they were part of the National Little League at that time. It saved them some money from insurance perspective and other things. But it also saved the league because schools like KGS and AY weren't going to continue in the league past fifth grade because girls were playing. And I found it great from Great Neck because I couldn't care less if a girl was playing or not because a lot of the girls in younger ages were better than the boys. But it kind of ended pretty poorly. I think the biggest, complaint is around umpires, is around um, the status of umpires. A couple of years they went to professional umpires. That's still hard to get, right? To get those professional umpires to be able to have time for them or them just to come out and do it. I think this year the biggest issue has been kind of the handoff between the older guys and you guys, and the schedule and how the schedule is going to change. I got to be honest with you guys. I told you individually, I hate a time limit in baseball. I think it's idiotic. Sorry.
No,
Baseball,
no, no. Please, this is what the podcast is for.
baseball's the only sport without a clock. Don't put a clock on us. If we want to have a 6 inning game, let's have a 6 inning game. Um, you know, people think it's advantageous for my team because we'll finish games and we'll be up after 4 or 5 innings, and then they don't have to see our second or third pitcher. Well, you see our second pitcher and he's better than our first pitcher. So I couldn't care less if the game goes to 7, 8, 9 innings. We're still going to beat you. But baseball is the only sport without a clock, and I think that's a pure way of doing it. I know the things that bug people about this league are like the steals rules. I think those are tough. I think the definition of when to slide and when not to slide drives people absolutely bonkers. It's the biggest fights have been about, is that running into somebody, or do you have to slide, or when do you not have to slide? I gotta say that most teams don't practice, so most teams are not teaching stuff like sliding. I practice every Friday. You can find me in Allenwood Park at 4:45. So that's for me. One of the bigger things is, you know, especially in the older leagues, you get into seventh and eighth grade, like you're still limiting the number of steals to 3 steals, and you can only steal second and third base. Let's play ball, guys. Let's make it real baseball a little bit more than it is. We want to do that in fifth and sixth grade with stealing, fine. The other thing is, and this is more of a city thing, is that kids complain about the wood bats, but that's something that is it's the last couple of years is the first time I've heard complaints from kids about that. Mostly because the composite bats are so good now. But I know it's a city ordinance that we have to use wood bats for city fields, so I really couldn't care less.
Which New York City?
New York City, yeah, you can't use for anything under.
Oh, that's interesting because I was talking to Zev Ader yesterday. He's one of the AY coaches, and he said he thought that it was a safety thing from the league. You're saying it's from New York City.
No, it's New York City ordinance. So yeah, when we got permits for Cunningham, Peck, Fly, all those, it's in the ordinances for running baseball in those fields.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not a softball thing because softball's a lot different.
Yeah. So, what do you think are the things that need to change in JCBL?
Look, I think that we need to do a better job of recruiting. We've kind of fallen off because some of the kind of traditional schools are no longer have the kid base. It's great to see Young Israel Queens Valley in this year. I haven't seen a team from them in a long time. That was a great addition. I think that what's happened with KGS and AY, they're kind of bringing in kids from all over the area, rather than utilizing the schools from different parts of Queens. Plainview had teams from over time. It would be great if we could incorporate West Hempstead in some way. I know.
Doesn't West Hempstead have a little league?
They may. I'm not familiar.
I think they do. I think they
Yeah.
do.
but look, I think the a league is only as strong as the number of teams you have, and I know in the junior division, because of the incorporation of Woodmere and the school that has a couple teams, it's gotten stronger in the junior division. The minors is strong this year, but you look at the majors, it's only 4 teams. It's that's rough.
Why do you think the majors has it the roughest right now?
Because of COVID, honestly. Those kids that were in first, second grade missed out on an important
Yeah.
year of baseball and actually went to basketball and soccer rather than playing baseball.
Why did they go to those sports? Was JCBL not running those years?
JCBL only did not run year, but the kids who were were playing basketball outside. They were playing soccer outside. Baseball, you need more coordination. You need more organization around it, and you could have one coach in somebody's backyard playing basketball or taking a bunch of kids to a soccer field. It's a lot harder with baseball.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Avi, anything else you want to ask Etan about?
No, yeah, I'm actually very curious about this. This is something that I was, curious about for a long time, and like David was saying earlier, running, not running, but starting with the JCBL this year is a tremendous something that we're very proud of. We think we could do a lot with, and we also want to be very careful with because we're aware that the league's been around for so long. We don't want to be, the new kids on the block, like, oh, this HSL sports league been around for 1 year. Who do they think they are coming in and messing with us? So it's a very, very delicate thing for us, which is why, we're trying to keep as much for this year the same, and really, before you do anything, to make sure that it's run by the proper people. Something that I had, a little bit of thought about, sort of like you were mentioning about the recruiting and the bringing in more kids, and sort of like a balance is sort of turning it into more of an open registration, which each kid could register under their own shul. You keep the kids together with their shuls, but sort of doing it in a format where instead of you registering through the shul and each individual shul throws in a team, you're registering through open registration. You put down, I'm in, I go to X in Great Neck. You sort of keep this teams the same in a sense, but that it also allows other kids who aren't necessarily associated with the mainstream shul, who are putting a team into the league, to join up with other teams or to be added to certain teams and sort of grow the league that way. For example, you have 29 kids who sign up who aren't associated with the shul. Potentially, either you can add a couple kids to other shuls or even make their own teams and throw in a team that's not necessarily associated with the shul, just whatever regular team to help grow the league and expand the league. Just an idea I was thinking about. That way, it sort of holds that balance of keeping the shul integrity there, but also helping to grow the league.
So the culture really has been, at least for Great Neck, is to kind of keep similar teams together throughout the whole period of time. You have
But
kids fall off and not want to play. You combine 2 teams if there's 2 teams at the same age level. That culture's been around. I know that there are certain shuls that have A team and a B team. AY historically being one of them. I'm going to call them out on it because they do it all the time, and they make
there
it
are a
less.
few. There are a few that I
They,
personally talk very candidly, and honestly, I'm really not. I'm not so happy about it. It's unfortunate. It's unfair to the kids, in my opinion. But
yeah,
anyway, go ahead.
think what you're talking about would be great for the younger ages, third grade, fourth grade. When you get into fifth and sixth grade, if you don't have a team together, I almost frankly we had kids sign up who had never played before this year. And so when I get to 12 players in a sixth grade team and I can only play 10 in the field, and when I get to the playoffs, I'm going to only hit 10, it's really hard to tell a kid who has been working at it for 4 years, you're going to be sitting because of this kid who just happens to be pretty good at hitting the ball, that who's never played before on this team, that he's going to get slot before you. And so you want to give it to the kids who have really worked for it over a couple period of time. And so
Uh-huh.
I would
You
say
should
if
maybe
you're
grow it out from the young.
rolled
Start from
out,
third, fourth, and then that's actually
yeah.
it's a very good idea, actually. I mean, leave the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. You already have their team, sort of leave that intact for now, and start from the kids coming in, sort of start up and grow up from there. It's actually a
Absolutely. I think that's a great way of doing it because then you get the culture of being together and doing it. Kind of that used to be how KGS would act, where we used to have games at 1 o'clock and then at like 3:30, right? The 1 o'clock games were all kids who didn't have school on Sunday, and so I couldn't have many kids who have school on Sunday on my Great Neck team because we would usually have mostly 1 o'clock games. Those kids would go play for KGS. And so then it became a mishmash of different kids from different places who had school on Sunday who wanted to be on a team that was playing later. That's changed. And so you see where Queens Valley is kind of moved, in the direction where they moved. And I think that's great. And KGS a little bit later on.
That's
At
very
one point, when I was doing this, maybe 7, 8 years ago, there were at least two Great Neck teams in every division, and at least two KGS teams in every division, and at least one Mashadi team in every division, and at least one AY team. But if you look at the total number of kids, more than half the kids came from Great Neck. That's not; those numbers are not the same like they used to be.
Does Great Neck not have the same kid base that it used to?
Actually, more.
So what's the shot, Etan?
JCC
What's
basketball.
JCC?
You even see it. I know in third and fourth, the third grade team has half their team is on a travel basketball team that has a hard time getting all the kids there on a Sunday to be able to play.
It's so funny to me because like we at the HSL, we run basketball leagues in the fall and winter for grades 3 through 8, really competitive, fun basketball leagues. But in the spring, we sort of dial it down because the spring and summertime are the only times you can actually play baseball. So,
Right. So they're not dialing down. They're dialing up travel teams that are playing against non-Jewish competitors.
so they're playing all year round, fall, winter, and spring.
Playing all year round. And I got to tell you, playing against non-Jewish competitors is much better for the development of a kid in basketball. I have my own opinions on high school basketball too. Being a little bit of an outsider and also being a former manager of the YU team, um, the kids who develop outside of New York will have more longevity because they're playing against a diverse mix of kids. If you think about it, a kid who grows up and goes to DRS, you're playing the same kids in camp and in high school every single year, unless you're playing in a travel league. Your type of competition that you're having, if you're at the top of your game, is not going to be diversified as it would be if you're playing at a EULA where you're playing non-Jewish high schools, right? And you're playing a much more diverse. You talk to some of these high school basketball coaches now, they're trying to get games with non-Jewish smaller schools, Catholic schools, whatnot, to be able to get that diverse level of competition. I think that's something that is happening naturally with these select teams in basketball. And so it's led to a longer season and a spring season, which is less kids playing baseball. Here, the level of competition in baseball is still pretty high. And so, look, no one is going to major leagues, but my best friend's kid in West Orange is playing in a select team that is non-Jewish. It's they know he won't play on Shabbos, but enough of their games are on the weeknights and the weekdays, and he's a lucky pitcher, and that they want him on the team, and he plays consistently.
All right, we got to wrap because I have a meeting. But Eitan, you're obviously a huge sports junkie, which I don't think I realized. We've been texting and we spoke on the phone a few times. But you obviously have a wealth of knowledge, especially about the Jewish organized sports scene. So this was really enjoyable, and we'll probably do it again soon. And from what I hear, your second and third pitchers are not really all that good, despite what you're saying. So I wish you luck. I wish
you
you
have
luck.
no idea who my second and third. Just don't forget, I have given up one run this season.
Which team are you most afraid of in your division?
All of them.
Okay, good answer.
Good answer. All right. That's a great coach answer right there.
Thanks so much, Eitan. Looking forward
Thanks,
to doing it again.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey. Eitan,